Have you ever wondered what it would be like to live on a deserted island surviving off only coconuts? Well, the island of Amanu comes pretty close. Join us, Kate, Curtis, and Roxy the dog aboard Sweet Ruca as we explore one of the most remote islands you've ever seen. Come along and see how one island of 200 people thrives off of nature's bounty. We anchored in front of the town to say hello to the mayor of the small island of Amanu. The flat motu is made up of only 200 people, palm trees, and lots of wildlife. A motu is a reef islet that was formed from broken coral and sand. While there are no hills to protect you from the wind and conditions, the reef from the motu will protect you from the waves and swell. However, there are other dangers lurking inside the large circular island. The bottom is littered with bommies, also known as coral heads, many of which spire up to the surface, creating hazards just below. Something you have to be on the lookout for while moving about. But they can also cause problems while at anchor. The town of Amanu just so happens to have an anchorage filled with bommies, and if the wind shifts after you've set your anchor and you start to spin, you are likely to tie your chain in a knot around the large coral down below. Therefore, many boaters use floats, like fenders or old pearl farm buoys, to keep the chain floating above these coral heads. Unfortunately, it doesn't always do the trick. Because there is little to no protection from the wind, it is even more important to keep an eye on the weather. The strong winds can build up waves from the fetch inside the island, creating an uncomfortable or even dangerous anchorage. It is also important when timing your entrance into the motu, as the only two narrow passes can build up strong currents, and even standing waves, according to the conditions. You can see that our entrance on a calm day with the appropriate current allowed for an easy entrance, where here it is a bit rocky and rolly and could potentially sweep you into the coral. The island of Amanu is located in the southeast region of the Tuamotus and lies at a right angle, which is quite odd in comparison to the other islands. The island is about 560 miles to the east of Tahiti. In order to reach it, you'd have to take multiple planes and ferries over several days. Its inner lagoon is about 93 square miles or 240 square kilometers. Many travelers don't usually arrive to this island since it is out of the way or often against the wind. Coming from Chile and the Gambier Islands, which are further south, it was a bit easier to sail directly to Amanu. We made sure to stop here and see what remote living is like in French Polynesia. Since the island does not get many visitors, those of us in the anchorage headed into town to introduce ourselves, where we were then promptly invited to lunch with the mayor to welcome our arrival. We shared bananas and grapefruits from Gambier, as the island of Amanu is covered in a plethora of many palm trees and coconuts, but not much else. Luckily, a few French cruisers were bilingual, helping us to communicate with the locals. The food was amazing and the company even better. We inquired about how the island gets medical treatment and learned that locals must take a small boat to a neighboring island that can then leave by ferry or small plane for the larger island of Tahiti. We also learned of a cyclone that had hit the island in the 1980s, completely flattening it and killing many people that had no place for shelter. We wanted to know more about the culture of the island, and so the wife of the mayor invited us back the next day to see the traditional way of how buildings were constructed using palm leaves.
We have 2 leaves here of the palm, and the one farther away from your work is going to cross over the top, and then underneath, over the top, underneath, just like a simple basket weave. And you just want 3 on top, and you want to make sure that it's nice and tight. You don't want all these holes, so you need to make sure they're nice and tight so that it is waterproof. The green ones are just for practicing because they are not fully dry, and then once they dry, they will shrink, so that will create more holes. But it's good for me to practice before making the real ones. But they do only last about a year, so they will have to redo it again next year for the festival. So yeah, and it really creates a nice, cool environment inside the house while keeping it dry.
We got to give it a try, but it certainly takes some practice to get as good as the locals here. Nowadays, the locals use the metal roofs from old military bases or flight hangars, but they keep their cultural traditions alive by passing on the knowledge of how to create the thatched roof houses. Of course, there is still evidence of European and French influence on the little island. Even in a place as remote as this, the European colonization is still evident. As it turns out, palm leaves are not only used as shade and protection for living, but also for protection of your face. A lovely local woman who wished not to be filmed showed me one of the 3 popular methods for weaving a hat from palm leaves. The sun can certainly come down strong, and when you're working outside with palm trees and coconuts, it's important to protect your skin and eyes from the strength of the sun. First, she fitted our heads and then stripped down the palm to make it more flexible and easier to work with. Once the base was ready to go, she secured it into a circle for us to start the weaving process.
C'est pas facile, mais c'est le plus facile que je vous apprends.
It's not easy, but it's the easier one to learn.
The woman explained that she really loves crafts, art, and the cultural traditions of the island. She desired for us to take from her shell collection and also managed to make these beautiful shell turtles overnight as a thank you for spending time with her. We were also lucky enough to learn a little about the economy of coconuts on the island. The island of Amanu is covered with thousands of coconut palm trees. Other than the houses, coral, sand, crabs, and people, the island is simply covered with palm after palm. Like any farm, it is vital to keep track of the crop and the amount of fruit you take from the tree, as it can take up to 10 years for one tree to produce a fruit ready for use. The coconuts go through stages. The greener the nut, the more liquid is inside. Once the nut starts turning brown and ages even more, the meat of the coconut is formed and can be used to create oils and milk. They begin by husking the coconut by hand, a fairly lengthy process. Then the nut can be opened using a special tool, and the meat is scraped out and then set out to dry. The drier the coconut, the easier it is to grate and then squeeze out the oils. On Amanu, the dried coconuts get weighed and then sent to Tahiti for processing using large machines, where the majority of the oils are then used to make cosmetics. Other than for economy and use of the leaves for structure, the coconut still offers the traditional use of fresh coconut water and delicious meat. Since the island is made from sand and coral, it is very difficult to farm much of anything else, and fresh food from the supply ship often goes fast. I wonder if the people here ever get tired of coconuts. The other option on the island is fresh fish. It is so remote that few large fishing vessels have made their way to interfere with the island. Many fish, octopus, and sharks can be seen swimming almost anywhere in the lagoon. The famous Chimera maxima clam, also known as the two-faced clam, can be found plentifully under the sea in their vibrant colors of greens, blues, and purples. Seeing the black-tipped reef shark so often can be a little intimidating, but the majority of them are really like big puppy dogs, and we often find ourselves seeking one out. With a change in the weather, we moved the boat to the northeast end of the island to protect ourselves from the fetch of large waves created by strong winds from the east. We were lucky enough to enjoy a weekend barbecue with the mayor and the 2 other boats anchored with us before the big winds came. The palm trees did little to protect us from the wind, but the sea was flat and the anchor held well in the larger patch of sand we found on this side of the island. After the bad weather passed, we enjoyed a day relaxing on the beach in our own little private paradise. Wow, I know there's a lot of wind noise, guys, but can you believe this came all the way from Japan to French Polynesia? Crazy. It's well weathered as well. We found bottles that came all the way from Japan, and of course quite a few fishing buoys along the shore. We also took the opportunity to re-glue the bottom of our dinghy that had begun to separate. It's quite a bit old, but has been hanging in there through all the abuse we put it through, especially all the rocky shorelines of Patagonia. After the sunset, we turned on the blue spreader lights to see what kind of fish we could attract, and were not surprised when we saw even more sharks. It's incredible to think about how insanely remote this little motu is in comparison to the rest of French Polynesia. Not many people or even yachts visit this little island, and the way of life is very dependent on the environment, especially the coconut tree. When I asked the locals how they feel about sailboats visiting their home, they shared mixed feelings. Some cruisers cut down the coconut trees in order to reach coconuts from high up without the necessary tools or skills to obtain them. Since the island economy is dependent on the coconut and palm tree, this is such a sad thing to hear. But still, many of the locals enjoy the quick passers-by, sharing a meal, a smile, and the rich culture that still shines through this incredible place. Next time on Sailing Sweet Ruca, we attempt a new sail plan that we've never tried before on this J46 and make our way to the famous island of Tahiti. Want to see more behind-the-scenes content? Check out our Patreon page at patreon.com/Ruca. A special thanks to our current Patreon crew who make these videos possible. If you're enjoying our channel, please like and share our content, as this is the easiest way to support us. And as always, don't forget to click subscribe and come along for the ride. See you next time!